So we are live, YouTube live. So we're doing the Badass Book Study Part 4. And this one is to get over your BS already. Um, this chapter, I think, definitely goes a little deeper. Sorry, readjusting. Goes a little bit deeper into some of the concepts that we've already explored. So there is some reiteration. Um, 17 is it's so easy once you've figured out it isn't hard. And this one, what you choose to focus on becomes your reality. This is a lot about mindset again, but a slightly different perspective. So, if you want to delve deeper into this one, I would recommend the book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, talking about how you change your mindset in the situation that you're in, and it can completely change your reality. So, the concept is that we all live by our stories, and each one of us has a story, and our story is what defines our perspective. So that if we change our story, maybe your story is that I always have bad luck with school, or I always suck at something, or I can't do this, and that becomes your story. And so, anytime you enter that situation, that excuse or that story is what always comes about. So, our entire experience on this planet is determined by how we choose to perceive our reality. And this is one where if you've ever had that friend like that totally believes something and then you're going, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe she thinks that way because that's totally not true." Or that's just such a weird way of thinking of things. Like we can see that this is the case for lots of different situations. So become aware of what your stories are is part 1 or step 1. So listen to the sentences that always begin with I always, I never, I can't, I shouldn't, I suck at, I wish, I want as opposed to I will and I am, I don't have, one day, I'm trying to. So they tend to be phrased like excuses because they kind of are. All right. Another good place to catch yourself in a story is by looking at the areas of your life that are sagging. If you're constantly angry, maybe your story is, no one understands me. And if you're always overweight, maybe your story is, I have no self discipline. If you're uninvited from Thanksgiving dinner because you wouldn't let anyone else talk at the last three family gatherings, maybe your story is, no one pays attention to me. And although those completely feel legitimate to you, and I do want to say that this chapter is a little harsh, so if you're not ready to hear these things, you might not want to keep listening. Um, so one is, let's say that your story is that you can't make money. So by saying you're broke, you get to be right. You get to be the victim, which means you get to be dependent on other people, and that gets you attention. Other people will offer up to pay, and you don't have to take responsibility. You get to give up on before you start and avoid possible failure. If things in your life fall far from below the mediocre scale, you get to blame other people and circumstances instead of taking risks to change it because you can't afford it. Now, on this next one, she does talk about depression, and I want to extremely clarify. She's talking about depressed as in sad, not depressed as in the clinical state of depression. So there is a big difference on those. So I'm going to rephrase what she says just a little bit. So let's say, for example, is that the story is that you're depressed, meaning you're terming your sadness as a state. Chances are pretty good that even though you feel awful, so maybe you just like, even when you feel in a funk, you feel in a rut, so let's put it that way. When you feel awful and you don't have to work hard or do the laundry or go to the gym, it feels very familiar and cozy and comfortable, and it gets you attention. People come in and check on you and sometimes bring you things, and it gives you something to talk about. It allows you not to try too hard to move forward or face possible failure. It lets you drink beer for breakfast. She's so cute. All right. So you get the idea of that. Of course, the next step is fairly rational. Get rid of your stories. So now look at your list of false rewards for what they really are. Scared little parts of you acting out. Thank them for trying to protect you and for keeping you company, but tell them it's time to run along now. So I want you to envision or write down what it looks and feels like to have the real adult you replace your old, maybe childhood story, and feel it. Get excited by it. Then make the decision that you're ready to change and take positive action in the direction that you want to go. Because ultimately, we get caught up in fear, and we're going to talk about that one next. So let's break it down. So you would figure out what your story is. So this is, we'll say, Sally or Jane, and she's got a problem with men. Okay, she says, I can't meet men because there aren't any good ones out there left, and that's her excuse. So she breaks that down to, okay, I just suck at flirting. And then she says, well, I never know what to say to men. Then she says, well, maybe I'm not attractive to men, not the good ones anyway. Okay, that's another excuse flaring up. And then she's like, I scare men away. I don't trust them. I don't believe that there really is anyone out there for me. So then we got down to the core of it. She doesn't believe it. And that ultimately, as you can probably see, is that she just doesn't think she's good enough. So maybe she's having a hard time attracting the guys that appreciate her in the way that she appreciates herself. All right. So then she can literally take each one and replace it with the new truth. So by saying there aren't any good men out there for her, she can say, I don't have to take responsibility for why I'm not meeting any. The world is filled with awesome, loving men, and I'm capable of, or so excited to find me a good one. And we're starting to change it. And then it becomes, I get to feel, or one thing that she could be is that I feel victimized and I can be right for staying single. Or she could say, I'm powerful and in control of my life, and I choose to love and be loved. I get to prove how lame men are by never being with a good one. We see how those differ. So then we can change that again into, I love and trust men, and I'm so thrilled to be with an awesome guy who makes me giddy with happiness. So we can see that play on play and how our ego, again, we talked about that, our ego kind of pushes us back. So these are your homeworks. List off all your old stories that you've gotten in the habit of thinking of. Journal about the false rewards that you get from them. Feel into these false rewards. Thank them for their help and decide to let them go. Take each false reward and rewrite a new powerful story to replace them. Repeat this new story or affirmation over and over until it becomes your truth. And then behold your new awesome life. Ta-da! Okay. So a big thing that you'll have to do is get out of the routine. So if you constantly avoid things because of those avoidance attitudes, you'll have to change that up as well. So go out into the world and trying, yet deep down going out into the world and trying, yet deep down believing that you're ruled by your past circumstances is like forgiving someone, but still hoping that they sit in something wet. So you might forgive them, but you didn't really actually forgive them. So you got to do the deep work and like really let it go. Okay, procrastination. Who does that? Definitely something I slip into very easily, and I know most of my clients do as well. So let's talk a little bit how procrastination is definitely your ego self-sabotaging you. So because so often when we say we're unqualified for something, we're really saying is that we're too scared to try it, not that we can't do it. All right, so this is where we avoid something because we're like, oh, well, I need this in order to do that. or it's just like a self-sabotaging way, something that we're just totally telling ourselves no and trying to give an excuse to it when really we're just scared to go and do it. So if you're serious about changing your life, you will find a way. And if you're not, you'll find an excuse. And that is so true, so true. So I don't know if you've heard these stories about these people. I was listening to one today, and it was like this guy got rejected by 30 something banks on his business idea. And he finally got to bank 32, and they finally were like, yes, we're going to give you a chance on this. Um, that person, they didn't let excuses get in their way. They were serious about their dream, and they were absolutely nothing to get in the way. That's where you see these people that are super successful. Do you think they went out there and just did it on their first try? No, they knew what they wanted. They were clear about their dream, and they were not going to hit the snooze button if they knew that they had to get up to the gym at 6 o'clock every morning because of the weight loss goal that they wanted to do. They knew that if they wanted to go back to school and get their PhD, that there was step A, B, and C that they had to follow. And do you think they were going to let something get in their way? Hell no, not if they really wanted it. You can make excuses, and it's because one, either you don't really want it and someone has told you that you want it, or two, you're scared and you're trying to find a way to avoid it. And I don't know about you, but Adulting 101 says most of us are avoiding or distracting ourselves so that we don't actually have to do it. We make up excuses like, I don't have time. We make up excuses like, I'm not good enough. And really, we didn't even give it a try. We're preventing ourselves before we even get started. So a suggestion is make a bet with someone mean. Notice where you always stop. So maybe you're a person that tries to accomplish programs or tasks or something of that sort, and you always never finish. Maybe notice at what point you're not finishing. And remember that done is always better than perfect. So you can get it done and then you can perfect it. Don't think that it has to be perfect along the route. And I'm totally guilty of that one. But yes, make a bet with someone mean. Own it and just work with it. So just do your best. All right. I have lived a long life and I've had many troubles, most of which never happened. How many times have you sat and thought about something for so long and you could have been spending that time actually doing something, but instead you're running through all these possible scenarios. And again, they're all hypothetical. All these problems came about inside your head, and you never even actually had the problem. And we'll get ourselves really worked up and stressed out about that. So life is a dream. Don't turn it into a nightmare. And then time is an illusion. So, and physics says this. Time is a perception, and we know this because sometimes when we have to do something we don't want, it feels like it takes forever. And then when we're doing something that we like doing, it goes by super fast. Sorry, my low battery. There we go. It goes by super fast. So, one thing that I find really works for me is time blocking. And I'm not always perfect at it, but when I do it, it works really well. So I have to remind myself to do it. And so I block myself off for an hour by hour. So let's say I have 3 hours to get some stuff done. I could easily turn Netflix on and go through some episodes real quick. Or I could take those 3 hours and dedicate 1 hour to each project in my case. And I would set a timer and I would say, okay, I've got an hour to work on this. And then once that hour is up, I mean, unless I'm really on a roll and I'm doing really well, normally I'll stop and then I move to the next task. Because sometimes if we don't do that, we can get really caught up in distractions again. So another thing is know what your distractions are. Let's see, she says, what do you find yourself doing instead of doing what you're supposed to be doing? Are you screwing around on Facebook, answering emails, eating even though you're not hungry? And once you know what your favorite distractions are, you can build up a good defense against them. Turn off the internet and phone while you're working. Make the kitchen off limits until you know you've not gonna find yourself in front of the refrigerator and just staring blankly, and who knows how long you actually stand there, right? So I talked about the time blocking, but also know that like make a to-do list and see what's actually necessary, because a lot of times we make a to-do list and we feel like we have to get everything on there done, and it's totally like brain rattling because you don't even know where to start. So know that there's things that can be done first, second, and third. The things that absolutely have to be done, the things that mediocrely need to be done, and the other things that are kind of just time sucks. Like figuring out a new skill or something like that. That might be a time suck. So there's a bucket analogy that I really like, and you've got sand, gravel, and big rocks. And most of us put the sand in first, all these menial things. We kind of avoid the big things. But if you put the sand in, the gravel, and then the rocks are like tumbling out, and there's not enough time or room to do that. But if you put the big rocks in first and then the gravel, the sand will fill in. So sometimes you might get some of those menial tasks done, or realize they're not even necessary at all. So be aware of that. Um, Another thing is just stop talking about how busy you are. Because again, if you're totally filling yourself or putting it out into the universe that you're busy all the time and you don't have time, then you're not, because you're too busy talking about that you're busy. All right, then ask for help. So one is just get a different perspective on things. So maybe you need to talk to a friend, or sometimes if you don't have a friend, you can just audio talk it out. And sometimes just speaking out loud, you'll figure it out yourself. Um, but get a new set of eyeballs to look at the situation, because maybe they're just like, oh, maybe you're volunteering too much, or maybe you can, you know, double up on that, or do you really need to be doing that? Because is that worth your time? Working with a pro will save you a lot of time and money in the long run, because you won't have to spend all the time undoing or doing over what your wimpy attempt was at first. And I can speak firsthand on that. So make a to-do list. What needs to happen right now? What can wait? Can these be two separate lists? What's the big important list? What are the piddly ones? So what I kind of talked about. And then there's a big difference again back on that mindset. So doing what you're doing in joy, or doing what you're doing in misery. You're still doing it. So you can choose to look at it from one perspective, maybe like, I'm choosing to do this and this is going to be fun. Or I don't want to do this. I hate this. This sucks. And most likely the quality is poor and it takes longer. All right. You just put aside that you can't be perfect either, and you can't do everything at one time. You can also delegate tasks. If it's piddly little things that you can pass to someone, pass it to someone. Remember that you are number one. And if you have a hard time with self-care, I do have a self-care program coming up. And if you're exhausted and you need a break, the world will not stop if you take time off. Because if you get yourself so exhausted that you get sick, you're going to have to take time off anyways, and then you're not even going to enjoy your time off because you're sick while you're spending that time off. Fears for suckers. So there's something called the crab effect. If you put a bunch of crabs in a bowl, while one finally figures out how to get out, the others will actually pull it back in. So don't let people do that to you. But also know that when people do, it's this group ego, so the society ego, or collective karma, or something like that. Allow yourself to break free. Allow yourself to make fear jumps. So, like taking out a giant loan to build your dream business, or going to travel around the world for a year, quitting your secure full-time job because there's something else you want to do. And of course, that's your own discretion. Don't do that because I said so. Meet the most incredible person and fall in love. Let yourself fall in love. So notice, is your fear greater than your faith, or is your faith greater than your fear? Life is either a daring adventure or nothing. To keep our faces towards change and behave like free spirits is the presence of fate and strength undefeatable. On the other side of your fear is your freedom, because if you don't try it, you won't know. Our greatest fear is also our greatest waste of time. So if you were on your deathbed, what would you say your biggest regrets are? And you might even choose that based on the decisions. So, I'm on my deathbed. Am I going to regret not giving this a try? Because once you're there, you don't have time to try to redo it. Okay. Be in the moment. Meditate. Don't let the other crowds pull you down. And don't think of anything upsetting in bed at night. All right. The people you surround yourself with are excellent mirrors of who you are and how much or how little you love yourself. And I'm going to talk about that one a little bit more in the next video, talking about how your environment is a reflection of yourself and how you can use those to grow. And when challenges present themselves and people irritate you, how you can say thank you and use those to grow from. So check that out on an upcoming video. Next section that we will have, and the final part of this book study, is part 5, how to kick some ass. All right. So have a fantastic rest of your evening or rest of your day whenever you're watching this, if you didn't get to watch it live. As always, like, subscribe, and feel free to leave me a comment. Actually, I love comments. I would love to see your comments. Yeah, let's go be a badass.